Hi, welcome back to Backstory Scripts. This one's actually coming pretty soon after our latest episode, even though we had like a massive gap between Alien Engineers and it because we did it quite a while ago and had to wait for the proper release. But this is what we talk about feature doing in the future. At the end of it, it's the Island of Dr Moreau, which is kind of an infamous film.
Yeah. Well,
More,
this one was actually requested. This was our first request that we took.
I did completely forget. I remember someone requesting also that we did Alien 3
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah,
Like that was in the same comment, wasn't it?
it was. Yeah, it was. So this one is infamous, as you said. Not unlike some of the other ones, like Shadow Company that we did. Like Shadow Company never got made. This one is infamous because it did get made. It just got made into one of the biggest disasters in film history. Razzie, super Razzie winner, often put in like the worst films of all time list. And it's weird because it seemed to have quite a promising start. And there's a documentary, a famous documentary on it now, and I forgot what it's called, even though I watched it last night because it has such a long title. It's like
Yeah, I do remember it. Yeah, being a rather annoying title to ever remember.
yes, but it's a Jack's looking up what it's called, I think. But the documentary basically covers how the film got into this horrible, horrible state that it ended up with. But the reason that we chose to do this one is because the script itself has often been kind of suggested that the script is actually okay, that there's not a problem with that, and that it's all of the behind-the-scenes stuff that led to this famous travesty. So that's kind of what we're going to do with this one. That's why we picked to do the Island of Dr. Moreau. And I think the first thing that we wanted to talk about was some of this behind-the-scenes stuff, because I watched the documentary last night, and to
Yeah.
be honest,
So are you just going to be going like? Are you is I asked you this briefly before recording, but so are you just going to be explaining all the stuff in the documentary now, or kind of when
now
it comes up to relevant plot
I
points?
don't think, cause I don't think it's going to come up to relevant plot points because it's such a sort of massive clusterfuck that just affected the whole thing.
Right.
That it's not like you could go, at this point this was supposed to happen, but actually got changed to this. It's more like everything just went wrong.
Okay.
And so we'll just get it out of the way.
Yeah.
I would
If you're interested
recommend-
in the documentary, it's called Lost Soul: The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau.
there you
Again,
go.
that long title. You can get in the UK. You can get it on YouTube. You can buy it on YouTube. Actually,
It was on Amazon
You watched
Prime.
it on Amazon Video, yeah. Or if you, yeah,
It's I would genuinely recommend it to you, even if you know nothing about the film. If you have no interest in Dr. Moreau, if you don't care about this genre, if you don't care about the film, I'd still recommend it just because the story behind it is so bizarrely fascinating. It's a bit like a Social Network thing where, like, even if you don't like Facebook, I would just recommend it because it's like such a fascinating story of just like inflated egos and bizarre tragedies, and just it's so surreal you'd honestly think that it was made up. Like if someone wrote this as a script, you'd be like, nah. It's a bit like Tropic Thunder, only far more over the top, surreal, and just unbelievable. So the story is essentially that this guy called Richard Stanley, he made a couple of sort of cultish films, like cult sci-fi films, one called Hardware that was kind of like semi-popular, and he was basically gaining a bit of traction as kind of a promising, I don't know, John Carpenter-esque director. And
he was like B movies, like trying to make the jump to A movies.
yes, and it had always been his dream to make The Island of Dr. Moreau because he read the book and he loved it, and it turned out as well that he got involved into sort of looking at the background behind the book. And it's written by H.G. Wells. And it was written before Heart of Darkness. And you're going to roll your eyes because I've got onto Heart of Darkness already, but it's actually really relevant.
Right.
But H.G. Wells was friends with Joseph Conrad, the author of Heart of Darkness,
right.
which I've read. And
Yeah.
and it turned out they had a big falling out because Joseph Conrad was H.G. Wells accused Joseph Conrad of ripping off the character of Dr. Moreau, saying that Kurtz is basically the same because they're both kind of like figures that have escaped and established their own
See
law.
that. I can definitely see that
Yeah,
connection.
exactly. But it turns out that they were actually both actually, instead of ripping off each other, they were both inspired by the same man, who was Richard Stanley's great-grandfather, which is why Richard Stanley had such a connection to the material. So it was like a big deal passion project for him. And he tried to get it made for quite a while, but obviously because he was a cult B-movie director, wanting to make something set on an island with quite a lot of creature effects, it'd be a bit expensive. It was hard for him to get it. But he moved to London with literally no money, just change to live off, basically a homeless guy, wandering around London, catching buses to try and pitch it to studio after studio after studio. And it was honestly, it was heartbreaking, because he was so passionate and so kind of driven by this. He'd written a script, he'd got like artists to sort of draw a cover for the script and give concept art so that he could articulate his vision and pitch it. Come up with a really cool take on the film, which was basically like, he said, I don't want to make H.G. Wells's Island of Dr. Moreau. I want to make the version that he thinks H.G. Wells would have done if he was alive now.
Right, okay.
So he wants to do what he thinks H.G. Wells would have done in the 1990s were he alive. So he sets it in the modern day. He makes it kind of our version of what H.G. Wells was doing, which is a body horror, violent, kind of weird sci-fi take on it. If you look at the concept art, it's probably more exciting than reading the script, is looking at all the concept art and the weird visuals that he had that were just like, whoa, that is a strange thing. They go through this in the sort of first third of the film, just showing you all the weird visions and like imaginations that he had that were just like, that is a striking image. And
I watched the trailer for the documentary before reading the script, and it got me more excited for the script because there are some really cool like concept ideas in that. And just watching the trailer back now, you recognise a few more of the images. Like
I finished reading the script after I watched the documentary, and there was a bit towards the end where I was like, oh, that's what that was, because I was wondering when I saw that picture. So anyway, eventually he got New Line Cinema to bite. He managed to just convince New Line Cinema. And it sounds like the producer... This documentary made me hate New Line so much, because we know that studios are can be very manipulative, very cold and money-driven, but this made me think that New Line were worse than most. And it seemed like they hated him from minute one. Because Richard Stanley, when you watch him in the documentary, he's a very awkward, strange, like socially incompetent man. He doesn't seem to realize how weird he is, but he's nice. You know, he's nice. He's just a bit like, okay. But it sounds like these old crusty men working at New Line disliked him from minute one. And I got this because the executive producer at New Line, which is Robert Shea, he basically said, I didn't like him from minute one because he asked for 4 sugars in his tea, and I knew there was something wrong with him then. And from that moment on, he was trying to sabotage it, which is like, what? What's up with you? But you think...
That's such a very, like, that. If you tried to explain that to, like, an American, it sounds like the most British way to hate someone.
But New Line's American.
That's even weirder.
So New Line at the time, they kind of had a reputation for doing the kind of things Richard Stanley wanted to do. They were like the edgy studio. This is before Lord of the Rings. You know, they were making like the John Waters films, Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, they were making kind of cult B movies and letting directors do weird things, which is why Richard Stanley was like, "This is great. I got the right team here." And they gave him like a sort of initial pitch of like, you can do $5 million, $5 to $8 million cult horror-y sci-fi film. You can do it. We agreed to your pitch. Go, you crazy kid. He found this little island that he thought was perfect. He explained why it was perfect, because the geography of it was all anchored around this central island. And he was explaining, like, I wanted to do it here because if you see the mountain... I meant Central Mountain, I didn't mean island. There's a mountain in the center of the island, and he said that he could use it to sort of create an illusion of geography, because you'd always have that as a reference point for where people were.
And I think that they reference that in the script as well, isn't there? There's like one big mountain in the island,
So it was like, you know, he got his pitch, he'd been money starved, but poured his entire life into this project. He'd found his dream island, they'd given it to him and everything. And then some lunatic on New Line Studio said, right, this $5 to $8 million horror movie making, let's get Marlon Brando. Let's get Marlon Brando to be in the lead. So all of a sudden, its budget escalates because you're getting Marlon Brando. You know, it can't be the $5 to $8 million thing it was supposed to be. And instantly they were like, oh, we can't trust this Richard Stanley kid with this budget because of something they decided. You know, they were like, we need to get Dr. Moreau. Oh, wait, now this is going out of control. It was like a problem they engineered.
Shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
And then they were complaining about it.
And so initially, Marlon Brando was a bit hesitant to do it because he was having kind of family problems at the time. He was becoming the film he was working on at the time had to shut down production because he wouldn't show up to it anymore. This was another film from the same producers, and they were like, yeah, let's get him on this one. What could go wrong? Yeah. Eventually, so they were already trying to kick Richard Stanley out at this point. You know, he's just a young kid. We got his idea, but now we don't really need him. But Richard Stanley went to meet Marlon Brando in what sounds like the most bizarre meeting. He went with one of the people from New Line, one of the people who was trying to shut him down already. They went through to Marlon Brando's house where there were guard dogs baring their teeth, stopping them getting in. But Richard Stanley used a laser pointer to distract them so they could run into Marlon Brando's house. They got into Marlon Brando's house, and it turned out that the woman kept saying, like, if you don't put some air conditioning on, I'm going to fall asleep. So Richard Stanley deliberately made it so that it got warmer in the room so that she could pass out and he could have a one-on-one with Marlon Brando. So it's like a really, like... It's almost like a really bad, like, heist film or something. Like, he's just, like, distracting the guard dogs, changing the conditions in the room, like... And then he talked to Marlon Brando, who, at this point, was quite against Richard Stanley. It seems like Marlon Brando just decided he didn't like Richard Stanley before even meeting him.
A lot of people tend to do that, apparently.
But eventually they kind of bonded, because obviously Marlon Brando played Kurtz in Apocalypse Now. And there's this whole Joseph Conrad conversation. And they got into a conversation on Heart of Darkness. And it turns out that I think Marlon Brando kind of wanted to go back to playing Kurtz and saw playing Dr. Moreau as kind of a way into that. And all of a sudden they were like best friends. And then he said, like, Richard Stanley said, I was just as confused as anyone, but not more confused than that New Line exec who slept through the whole meeting and all of a sudden found Marlon Brando insisting that I direct the film. So it went from, like, they were trying to kick him out to now the big star was like, no, he's got to do it. But it felt like it was still falling through and they were still kind of saying, oh, we can't do this with the budget and everything. So Richard Stanley went to his warlock, and honestly, when I heard this part of the story...
This was what?
Warlock. Richard Stanley said in the interview is he went, so everything was looking down, so I decided to turn to black magic, and I thought it was a metaphor. I thought he just meant like he was going to do something a bit shady. No, he actually went to his warlock and they cut his arm and did a ritual around this symbol to try and get the film made. So it was like, okay, Richard, you're losing me a little now. But eventually they kind of, long story short, they got it kind of together. They ended up with Bruce Willis in the lead role, Marlon Brando and James Woods as Montgomery, who's like Dr. Moreau's assistant. Yeah. Bruce Willis had to drop out because he was getting divorced to Demi Moore at the time, and for legal reasons couldn't leave the country, whatever the hell that means. So they had to bring in a replacement, and they found Val Kilmer. So they brought Val Kilmer in, and Richard Stanley literally said, and this was the moment the film died. And if you watch the documentary, no one hides how they feel about Val Kilmer. But
really, because I feel like he's one of those people that I've heard about, like, about backstage things, but no specifics.
There'll be specifics, trust me. So they got their kind of cast together: Val Kilmer, James Woods, and Marlon Brando. But Val Kilmer instantly was like, I don't want to be the main character, because I don't have the time for this. I want my scenes cut down to 40% of what they currently are. Which is oddly specific, but okay.
Right.
He went for a script read-through over at Val Kilmer's house, and apparently he was there, like, smoking, not paying attention, being really judgmental, and constantly, like, butting in with criticisms. And then it turned out, eventually, the producers got a call from Val Kilmer, and Val Kilmer was like, I don't want to be the lead anymore. Can I be Montgomery? Because they need to have less scenes.
Right.
So they did that, yeah. James Woods is out. We need a new Pendrick, whatever his name is.
Pendick.
Yeah.
Prendick.
They bring in David Thewlis. Lupin. Professor Lupin.
Yes. Yeah.
And now they've got a cast together. So they go to this island, which it turns out the AD got out a rain map because he has to do a lot of the exterior stuff. And he was like, right, I need to understand these conditions.
Right, yeah.
And he opens up the map and went, so blue is torrential, heavy monsoon rain. And the whole map is that, except for the part where they're filming, which is this tiny little purple dot right in the centre. It's like so imperceptible. It's like, that's where we are. It's just flooded around the whole place. They arrive and it's monsoon season and half their sets get washed away. Destroyed. Richard Stanley's assistant gets bitten by a poisonous spider and her flesh melts. So he's freaking out, and the producers have put him in an apartment that's like 100 miles away from the set, and he can't drive, so every day he walks to like a bus stop somewhere to get the bus there. So he's freaking out at this point, losing his mind. He calls his warlock up, but his warlock, who is also a medical professional, has been doing some kind of experiment and has eroded part of his walls and now has a radiation poisoning and is dying and loses his arm. So at this point, Richard Stanley's assistant's flesh is melting because of a spider. The set is flooded and taken away from him. He's living outside of the set, and his warlock has radiation poisoning. The studio.
I still just find it funny that the weirdest thing to me with all of that is the fact that the warlock is also a medical professional. Like he can get a degree and still be a warlock.
It turns out as well that Richard Stanley is basically being cut out of production meetings because they're holding them in places he can't get to.
Right.
And because he can't drive, they know this. It felt very much like they were pushing him out of the project. And they have interviews with them in the film, and they made me so angry, because they were like, oh, he wouldn't turn up for production meetings, he just wouldn't play ball. And I was like, no, fuck off, you were engineering this. They were really snide and sneaky. You could tell just from their lame excuses and their unconvincing lies, you could tell just how sneaky and two-faced they were. I really hated them. So they were basically already pushing him out of the production. On the third day, they actually called him up and fired him, kicked him off.
On the third day of shooting?
Because they were like, well, you're not playing ball, you're not coming to meetings, and everything's going wrong, it's all flooding, so they fired him. He went off into the jungle and was not seen again.
Ever?
Well, wait, because he's interviewed in the documentary, so yeah, but for
I didn't know he was interviewed in the documentary, I just assumed that was it.
No, he disappeared into the jungle. They hired this PA who wasn't originally a PA, he was part of the concept design team, but he got fired for punching someone, and they turned him into a PA. And all the way through, you can tell this guy is high just during the interview, but he was explaining he was high all the time then. They told him, take Richard on this plane, make sure he gets on the plane and gets out and comes to LA. Like, you make sure he gets out of here. Yeah. But he took him to the airport, and it turns out he never got on the plane, and Richard Stanley just disappeared into the jungle on the island. They offered...
It's surprising this has not been a film.
They offered Richard Stanley this deal where they basically said, look, if you don't say anything about all the production troubles, if you don't say that we fired you, we'll give you your full fee. But you have to stay, like, within a certain radius, like a restraining order, away from the set. Basically.
Okay, yeah.
You can't go within a certain sphere. But now, obviously, they have no director. So they bring in John Frankenheimer, who made things like The Manchurian Candidate. You know, he was like, everyone on the documentary calls him an old school director, and it means he was a fucking bully. That's what it means.
Right.
Because they're like, oh, he was old school, and he took the old school approach, and you can just tell it meant he abused the crew. He yelled at people, and he was a selfish, nasty arsehole. And many of the anecdotes definitely reaffirm that. But the thing is, he was being like that against Val Kilmer, who was worse, and and Marlon Brando, who seemingly went off the deep end. Marlon Brando stopped coming to set because his daughter killed herself at this point. So he was obviously quite distant and not completely there. But eventually, about halfway through production, they filmed all the scenes without him first. They managed to get him to turn up, and he had lost his mind. I swear to God, like, he's just gone insane. He basically went, oh, I think Dr. Moreau should be wearing white paste on his face all the time. So he looks like a clown.
I was wondering where that would come into it. Yeah.
And he's wearing these hats, these weird hats all the time, because he's like, I think it's important that the character would feel hot. And he kept just changing parts of the script for no reason. But him and Val Kilmer were having butting heads, because Val Kilmer thought he was more important, and Marlon Brando thought he was more important, and there were
even though Val Kilmer didn't want to be the main character,
there was a 3-day hiatus at one point on shooting because Val Kilmer wouldn't come out of his trailer until Marlon Brando came out of his trailer first, but Marlon Brando wouldn't come out of his trailer until Val Kilmer came out of his first. So all these extras were there, like, in this horrible makeup, sat in the boiling sun, just waiting for one of these two egotists to be the first date.
Oh, so it's just like a petty contest.
It was so ridiculous. Val Kilmer set, basically, the director of photography had sideburns, and one day they were shooting, and Val Kilmer lit his sideburns on fire. And this made the whole crew basically, like, refuse to do anything until Val Kilmer, stopped being an arse. Because this isn't an isolated incident. He'd gone up to another one of the actors and said, like, if it's between me and you, it's me. Like, seemingly out of the blue, with no reason. He was constantly, like, making rewrites or refusing to do his lines. Just being a complete cunt, basically.
Right.
But, Marlon Brando, meanwhile, was making the most bizarre requests. Like, on his first day, he said, I think that in every shot with me, there should be peacock feathers behind my head. And he wouldn't film until this happened. So the production designer had to run out into the jungle, find a peacock, jump on it, and tear its feathers so that he could give Marlon Brando his peacock feathers. Marlon Brando also requested for one scene that he wears an ice bucket on his head. No one knows why, but he wouldn't film until he had this bucket on his head. And this scene is in the film. This is in the film. You can see there's just a scene where he's randomly got a bucket on his head. He wouldn't learn his lines, and the thing is, they were sending in rewrites every day from the sound of things. They were faxing them over from some Hollywood studio. So they were constantly getting rewrites, and Marlon Brando was like, I can't keep up with this. So he got his PA to basically, he had an earpiece in, and he got his PA to say lines to him on the day while they were filming. So you watch the film and you can tell, because he takes forever between sentences, because you can tell he's basically waiting for the prompt. But at one point, apparently, this is the best part, this is my favourite story. One day, his earpiece got tuned into a police scanner, and he just started saying the things. And it was the part where he goes, there's been a robbery at Woolworths. No one knows what's going on, he's just talking shit. It's just, what? But he's also, they got the shortest man in the world.
Yeah.
Is in the film. They got him to play one of the creatures. And Marlon Brando randomly took a liking to him. Because he went to this German guy on set and started, he couldn't speak German, but he started just sort of saying things in a German way. And the German guy couldn't understand him. So Marlon Brando got really frustrated. Went over to this little guy, and it turns out the little guy's Spanish. and started basically speaking nonsense Spanish. But the Spanish guy was clearly too polite and just went, "Sí, sí." So, so Marlon Brando went, "I like this guy. He has to be in every scene with me." And so all of a sudden, the dwarf is in every scene with Marlon Brando, dressed in the same clothes as him. And I didn't know this, but he's the inspiration for Mini-Me.
Yeah.
Because Marlon Brando has insisted that this guy's in every scene with him, and he put in this random scene in the middle of the film where they just play the piano and sing to each other, which is what they do in Austin Powers. So it's gone completely insane at this point. Lots of heated tempers, and apparently the dwarf got got an ego because he was Marlon Brando's pet, like his protege now.
Yeah.
And he went up to this one cast member reported saying hi to him one day, and the dwarf just went, "Shut up," and punched him in the dick, which is so Mini-Me. But at this point, the crew were
Isn't that what Mini-Me does in the film?
Yeah, that's what I thought. At this point, the crew were kind of losing their patience because, they signed on
of everything
3
happening.
to 4 weeks, and they had been there for 6 months. Not allowed to leave the island.
6 months? How did they afford that?
Well, they were being paid overtime, basically, and it goes to, the footage, behind-the-scenes footage of them at the time, and they are just basically having a party at this point, because they haven't shot for weeks, but they're being paid just to be there. And they've been, calling in these extravagant things, this one guy gets a massive Scalextric and just builds it around the set to play with. They start doing drugs and just having, weird orgies, but in makeup, and you see this, it's on the behind-the-scenes footage, they're just, going nuts. It's like the end of the script, when they all kind of...
Yeah, I was just
the big
thinking
party.
that.
It was like that. It's just they're all doing drugs and having these weird parties, and everyone's got a weird, extravagant thing that they've paid for. It's a miracle this film got finished. But anyway, 2 of them went out to get high in the jungle, and they found this crazy man hobbled by a lake, ranting to himself about how Val Kilmer ruined his life. It was Richard Stanley. They found him and went, "Richard, are you okay?" And he was, completely frazzled. But they were like, "Okay, we'll take you on set and you can see what they've been doing. We've completely changed everything. You can come and see." So they put him in a dog mask. They found one of the creature masks and escorted him onto set. Because you remember
How long had been gone for this point? How long
6
had he
months.
been disappeared? 6 months?
He'd been living on this guy's land, surviving against crocodiles, because it's a mad bushman living with aborigines and playing the didgeridoo and things. He had completely gone insane. But he got dressed up in the dog makeup and approached set, because obviously he's got that restraining order, he can't come in. He came into the set and started making threats about blowing it up, so it was high security on set. But he's in the film, you can see him, you can see the dog man that he is. And at one point, the director, not knowing who he was, obviously, said, "You there, extra, you take this gasoline," gave him a can of gasoline and went, your character needs to pour gasoline around the set. And then they gave him a lit torch as well. And he was talking about, how he really wanted to just burn it all to the ground.
Yeah.
But he didn't, to be fair to him. So it was...
that's alright then.
So
it's all fine.
It's literal chaos at this point. Marlon Brando taking over the film, wearing peacock feathers and a bucket on his head, making sure his egotistical dwarf gets to do whatever he wants, whilst Val Kilmer refuses to go on set, and the extras are having weird animal parties, and the former director snuck on set with gasoline in a torch. It's completely ludicrous. And the crew, who were sick of being yelled at by both the director and the 2 big egotist stars, started wearing t-shirts that said, "They are not gods, you don't have to obey them," which is a line from the film. They were walking around with that. Eventually they wrapped up.
So it is really turning into it's the best example of a film like the set of a film turning into the film itself.
Richard Stanley said that he felt like he had had a character arc because he'd gone from the creator, he'd gone from the Dr. Moreau like creator to this dog man with a torch ready to burn it all. Eventually, they managed to film what scenes Val Kilmer would actually agree to film. And the director instantly said, right, that's a wrap. And then in front of everyone went, now get that prick off my set. And basically they had a big confrontation. And he said, like, if I was making the life story of Val Kilmer, I wouldn't go near that cunt. And things like that. It was proper vitriol. They eventually managed to finish the film, though, and obviously it was a complete disaster. It's one of the most, like, hated films ever. Because it's just actors getting to do whatever they want. The constant rewrites. No, it's been muted down to a PG-13, which, if you've doesn't make any sense. But I just couldn't believe some of the stuff. And then Richard Stanley basically ends the documentary talking about how he'd like to get back into filmmaking, but he hasn't made a film since.
That's understandable.
Yeah. But that's the documentary, and that provides you some context for what was going on. It sounds pretty ludicrous. The woman who is the I forgot her name, the cat lady, the main guy falls in love with.
Aisa.
Yeah, she was Richard Stanley's friend.
Isa, yeah.
She was like Richard Stanley's friend and really believed in him. And so when he got kicked off the project, she tried to leave, but they basically pulled her aside and said, "We will ruin you. Like you will never work again." And so what she did was she asked this one assistant to drive her to Sydney. But Richard Stanley said, I don't think she understood I think she was lacking comprehension of Australia's geography, because that's the other side of the continent. But the guy drove her the whole way to Sydney, at which point they did like explicitly say, if you do this, we will ruin your life. So she had to work on the film against her will. So it just sounds like like the most miserable experience. Apart from for the extras who seem to be having the time of their lives.
Yeah. I was thinking that is one of the few things that it could have actually been pretty fun to be on there if you have no responsibility or no attachment to the project. It could be pretty fun.
I mean, like, I think that's the gist of, they're the most outrageous points. So obviously that gives you some indication, but I would still watch the documentary, A, just to hear it from the people themselves, and B, to sort of hear it come from all these different sources, which makes it feel way more believable.
Yeah.
And obviously it goes into some of the more of the original ideas and more of the minutiae of it. I've just kind of escalated it to its most outrageous points, like warlocks and peacocks and all that. But yeah.
I think that sounds more entertaining than the script. That's not an insult to the script. It just sounds more entertaining.
It sounds more entertaining than most scripts.
Yeah. And it is one of those things where that's, like, I would not doubt that if that is the inspiration for Tropic Thunder or something like that. And I would not be surprised. There's probably about 3 scripts out there already detailing the background of this film. Like, I bet you that's gone on the blacklist or something like that at some point, because there's like, I've seen like 4 or 5 scripts each for like behind the scenes of Wizard of Oz or behind the scenes of 2001 or The Shining or something like that. So there's definitely, I wouldn't be surprised if like in the next 10 years you see something like a behind the scenes of the Island of Dr. Moreau.
This is one I would really want to see.
Yeah, but if they do it well, it would be really fun.
The snideness of the New Line execs was just unbelievable. There's this one guy, like Robert Shea, at least he kind of, I don't know, at least he seemed a bit more upfront and honest and just like harsh. Like, you know, he would be the kind of person that just went like, you know, you're fired, and it would be very blunt. But there was this one I just found in the most disgusting, insipid, slimy piece of shit. He had that sort of Donald Trump thing where his mouth barely moved, and I always find it really creepy.
Botoxed.
You know, like
plastic surgery almost.
But he constantly presented himself as the nice guy, and I just thought that you caused all this, because he met the way he describes it, and instantly you go bullshit. He went, "Oh, I was just at a restaurant, and by chance, Val Kilmer was at a table, a couple of tables over. So I went over and said hi. And Val Kilmer told me all these problems from the set, and I said, "Oh, this Richard Stanley kid's having trouble. Maybe I should call Robert Shea and tell him that this Richard guy needs help." And then basically he called Robert Shea, and he was very Littlefinger-esque. Like, he tried to present it like he was, like, calling to get Richard Stanley help while sowing the seeds of, you should fire him. You should fire him. Like, oh, it's really all going wrong. I don't think he's experienced enough, and we should really give him some help. And it was very, very Littlefinger. And then he instantly went, "But I was not prepared for what happened next when they fired him." And it was just handled horribly. I wanted to be the one to deliver the news, but I felt like it was best that it came from someone else. And like, no, you were a cowardly little prick. I really hated that guy. He was just awful.
This is probably going to be half of the entire podcast, to be honest, rather than the script.
I would recommend. It's a very good documentary. It doesn't. The way it is done is it basically just cuts between interviews, so there's no like narration, no like interview presence. You never hear an interviewer. There's no narration. It is constant. It's just like people talking. You cut to them. You don't hear questions. You just and it's all cut together to sort of feel like a story that's progressing. It starts at the beginning and it does move through chronologically in an intercutting way that does feel very seamless. Like, you just feel like you're getting the story told quite organically. So I think it's very well edited in that sense, just the way that they probably condensed so much into this coherent thing. And it doesn't have that much behind the scenes footage, because I don't think that much exists, but what it has is amazing.
I think as well, like, if the whole set exploding thing doesn't sound interesting to you, which I don't understand why it wouldn't, but if you're actually interested in the story of Dr. Moreau as well, like, just from watching the trailer, you can see the concept art that's there, and it looks really quite cool. Like, it's actually really stylish, and it's kind of, while I know that it would be definitely adapted for what the film could have been, like, it looks like something that people would want to see, or people would be interested in. Like, you can tell it's a passion project just from the brief glimpses of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So, shall we go into the actual story of the Island of Dr. Moreau?
Yeah. Do you want to start? Because I just spoke for ages.
Yeah, no, I'll try and do I'll do the whole plot. Yeah, The Island of Dr. Moreau. It's written by Richard Stanley, the director, and Michael Herr. Did Michael Herr crop up at all in the documentary at all? Or?
Incredibly briefly. They basically, when Richard Stanley was still attached, he went looking for another screenwriter. Michael Herr was the one that he got. And then someone else took over later into production.
Yeah, because it's on the kind of title screen, it's The Island of Dr. Moreau by Richard Stanley and Michael Herr, revised by Wallen Green. So yeah. I think it's dated as 1994 on the document, so I assume that's pretty close to the production. It's probably one of the closest to production that we've gotten for one of these scripts, except for maybe.
Yeah, I guess. I've got some notes, so I might jump in a couple of places, but you feel free to go.
So as Harrison did mention, while the Island of Dr. Moreau was written in the 1800s, I believe, like late 1800s. Mm-hmm. So it's set in the future for them, but for us it's now the past, 2010s. So we start somewhere in New England. That's the headline. And we follow like a dog going through the forest. He comes across the cottage, where we go inside the cottage. There's a romantic ballad playing, and at the table is Edward Prendick. He just looks very depressed. He's like, on the tabletop. There's like notes, books, whatever. There's coffee. There's and a pistol with bullets loaded in, and he stops the song, starts a tape recorder, and starts saying about how like his thoughts on God following what you're about to see in the flashback, and puts a pistol to his mouth and then starts telling the story.
Yes, there's a framing device.
Yeah, so it's I've forgotten what some people call it, but it's like it is the I bet you're wondering how I got here moment. Like, it's let me tell you my story.
Yeah.
But he's just talking to a tape recorder. So yeah, so we cut to the South Pacific Ocean. It's sea everywhere except for this one small dinghy where there are 3 men on board. One is Prendick. He's dressed in a suit because he's a lawyer, and 2 soldiers. So basically, they're from the United Nations. They were on a mission and their plane's been downed. Pendrick says that they were being adrift for 4 days or something like that.
Yeah.
One soldier starts attacking the other soldier with a knife. Prendick tries to stop it, but both men end up killing each other, and they fall into the ocean, eaten by sharks. Prendick basically gives up on life, like just lies down in the dinghy, stares at the sun, and then when he wakes up again, he's pulled aboard a ship by a guy called Montgomery.
They introduce them. They introduce all three of them, and it's like a man with a droopy zapter mustache and sad eyes, an older man with a freckled face, and a dark man whose eyes shine. So it tries to sort of introduce the three of them via their physicality, but I still don't know who three of those are, because it only really clarifies which one Montgomery is.
Yeah, this thing is that, well, the dark man is later revealed...
Which is the one with the mustache, by the way.
Yeah, Montgomery is the one with the mustache, so it would have been Val Kilmer in the film,
yes.
Right?
Yes. Who is constantly shirtless for some reason in the film.
Oh, good. Good. I'm trying to find what the name of the dark man... But basically, the dark man is Moreau's child, one of his experiments.
Is it...
it's called Mei-ling.
Mei-ling, right. He's the one that in the documentary, he's the one that gets basically cut out of the film. Because he's the German one that wouldn't acknowledge that Marlon Brando was speaking gibberish. And so he gets replaced with the dwarf. He has like very little in the film. So he's in this script as a semi-major character, but he's barely in the film at all.
Yeah, he is. Okay. And the other guy is the captain. I kind of got a bit confused with what Montgomery kind of character was, because I felt like, just from the describing of like the mustache and sad eyes, I imagined him being a bit older.
Yeah.
But then around like halfway through, he suddenly becomes like surfer dude.
I think the gist is that he's...
Shift.
I think the gist is that he's like a counterculture, drugged up, free spirit who just does whatever he wants. Like, he's constantly taking drugs, and his entire character is basically that he kind of
he's
skirts
kind of just
with anarchy.
That's there.
It makes... I think the Val Kilmer thing makes sense in the sense that they want someone kind of cool. Because I get what you mean, and cause I think it's partly the name Montgomery makes you think of an older person, and then the mustache
it makes
does
me think
too.
like an old sea captain, like you should have like a captain's hat and everything.
Yeah, whereas the reality is he's almost like I guess Tyler Durden-esque kind of character. Like, he just wants to mess everything up. He's constantly taking drugs, and is like, don't take everything so seriously. And he does talk a bit. He has like the rhetoric of a kind of surfer. I was surprised, not knowing that much about the script when they started swearing, because I just envisioned the H.G. Wells story, and I kind of didn't know we were going in for something where people would be swearing and talking in the way they did, and I quite liked it. I felt like the characters had a bit more... They weren't as... I was expecting stuffy, boring characters.
Yeah, I think it just made them feel a bit more just believable, and I think it sets it up as... This, like you said, it sets it up as that's not something that would ever appear in the H.G. Wells version, so it kind of prepares you for some of the more darker stuff that it delves into later on. I'm not saying that swearing is on par with some of the stuff that happens later on, but it kind of sets you up as this isn't your dad's.
I think it sets
H.G.
it up
Wells
as Richard Stanley said, as this is what H.G. Wells might have written at the time, because H.G. Wells will have been on the edge of controversial. But it was Victorian controversial, and so if he was around now, he'd probably be writing something like that. I think that makes sense.
Prendick and Montgomery basically just talk for a while, like saying Montgomery gives him drugs to like make him feel better, and plugs him into an IV to stop the dehydration. But and Montgomery starts talking about how great the drugs is that he grows, which he doesn't shut up about for the entire film.
This was one of the actions says, Prendick is aware that he's in the company of a real character, which is which is very on the nose, but it's also the kind of thing that you'd say when you met someone's friend and they were a dick and you didn't want to say it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, he's a bit of a character, isn't he? Yeah. But they just kind of allow this for a bit of back and forth, like Montgomery just establishing that he's establishing his kind of carefree attitude, and Pendrick basically saying that, yeah, he's a lawyer, but he has also been in some rough situations in the past, so
Yeah.
it explains why he doesn't just completely break down when stuff starts going wrong later on.
The captain is basically wants them off the ship quite promptly. The captain does not like does not like Prendick being there, and Prendick kind of confronts the captain because the captain's sort of abusing. Who's he abusing? Is it May?
He's abusing Mling.
Yeah, and so they have a bit of a back and forth where he's basically saying like, you can't do this because I'm a special envoy for the United Nations, and he's like, I don't care, you're on my ship. Where are you gonna go? You do what I say on this ship.
So the purpose of the ship is basically, it's like, as Pendrick comes out onto deck, it's like it's covered in just animals like screeching and yelling at all times of the day, and like it's just the floor is like littered with scraps of vegetables, and I think it's just like it says indescribable filth and stuff like that. Like it's basically just almost just like imagine like the back of a zoo like on this ship, and so they're delivering. And Montgomery says, we can't take you to the mainland, but we've got to stop off at this island first, where I live.
Prendick tries to ask Montgomery a bit about himself, and I did quite like this bit where Montgomery says, I see as more like ships that pass in the night, not assholes who meet on the plane and tell each other the story of their lives, which that kind of sums up his character a bit, because that was where I kind of realised, oh, he's not like a stuffy British gentleman like I expected.
I do think that occasionally, like, some of the lines in this are actually pretty good. Like, I liked some of the ways that people deal with some things, like there's like when he puts in the IV drip into Prendick when he gets on the ship, he just says, "What is this?" And the guy and Montgomery just says, "Trust me blindly," which is just it's more interesting way than I've seen so many scenes of a character getting into trouble and then someone helps them and they have no idea how to trust, so the person just repeats "Trust me" or something like that, or "Don't worry" or something. And so it was a more fun way of doing a very not cliche thing, but a thing that happens so many times in so many films. It was little lines that, more specifically Montgomery's lines, I think were better than most of, like, characters of his type.
Rest assured that none of them are in the film.
Oh, good.
Because people like Val Kilmer kept getting it rewritten. So it's like it's one of those where the final product is basically a thing where everyone's constantly explaining the meaning and making allusions to God, and it becomes one of those heavy-handed, like, it becomes the Zack Snyder version, basically, where everyone's talking about Icarus and everything all the way through the film. Whereas this does have a bit more edge and a bit more wit to it.
Prendick goes to sleep, he wakes up again, and they're at the island. They start unloading, there are men on the shore unloading the animals off onto it, and he spots a figure in, I believe it's sort of close to the clothes that they sort of wear in the film, but he only mentions it once. It's Dr. Moreau, basically, in, like, not safari outfit, but I mean, like, the kind of white shirt, white trousers. I imagine it's a bit like Hammond in Jurassic Park, that kind of outfit. And at this point, the captain, for some reason, decides that now's the moment that he's going to kick Prendick off the boat, and they have a scuffle, and they actually throw him off the boat, and then for some reason the boat then comes back to pick him up, and Dr. Moreau helps him out, and he goes, "Oh, I didn't think he would actually throw you off." But at the same time, I thought they were at the island, so why are they throwing him off? Like, now, why does he have to come back onto the boat when he could just swim back to the island? This bit was felt like it was just so they could have a better introduction for Moreau than him just spotting him on a boat.
What I did like, the one part of this that I did like was that basically, obviously Prendick's kind of, he doesn't want to be kicked off the boat, and he, as far as he's concerned, he can just get on this island and call for help. So he thinks that he's kind of being saved when he's invited onto the island, and I like the fact that Montgomery basically is like apologising, and basically like Montgomery is not. It's clear from Montgomery's reaction that Prendick is not being saved, but is basically being brought into something much worse.
And it's just a little bit of dread, and also like, it shows Montgomery as more than just the, like he says, the kind of passing ships line, but he has got a bit of heart to him.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You get the impression that he likes him, but then at other times it feels like he doesn't, and it's a bit. I found some of that a bit confusing.
I think it's just he's kind of just like the wild card character,
Wild card, yeah.
right? Which kind of comes into where it sort of comes into it later. But they get off onto the island.
The first thing that happens is you get a general impression of the island. Like, they see that there's a load of people kind of acting a bit like savages, but they're playing baseball and stuff, and there's a like military-ish vehicle driving around. I forgot what they call it. What do they call it? A flatbed.
A flatbed truck, yeah.
Which is important. The flatbed truck kind of comes back in and out of it. So you get the general feel of what the island is like there. But when did it become apparent to you that they were animal hybrids? Because I felt like it didn't explicitly say it when he arrived, and it felt like something I'd notice.
Well, that's the thing, is that it's very strange, because it's not sure if whether or not there's meant to be a gradient to it, because he kind of, when he sees the people unloading the animals off the boat, he describes them as being a tiny bit dog-like. Like, their faces look weird. And I suppose from that you're supposed to take it like he doesn't, like, they're meant to sort of just look different to him. Like,
it's a race.
They're not meant to
thing.
look so animalistic that you're instantly like, yeah. But then, like, it's revealed like later on that the people that were unloading are basically like the henchmen of Dr. Moreau, the dog men, and they get more and more like dog-like as it goes on. Like, to the point where I sort of just imagined dog faces, like dog heads on human bodies.
I'm glad that you thought this was a bit confusing too, because it felt like I never really identified a point where it went from these are weird-looking foreigners to these are monstrous aberrations of nature. It felt like it just kind of eventually they were, but there was no point where that was explicit. So the Montgomery opens up a truck full of rabbits, and he kills one of the rabbits, kind of rebelliously, for no reason. He snaps its neck.
So Montgomery's kind of like releasing these rabbits out into the wild so that they can breed, so that they can catch more rabbits to kind of like feed the things that are still animal, like while
proper
they're at
animals.
The laboratory or whatever. Yeah, and then while he's talking about this, he's saying that all the people at the island are vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
Montgomery kind of acts like he catches like the last rabbit, and he acts like he's just going to let him go, and then like twists his neck, and it describes like the animal screaming. So it's another one of these hints that you're in for something darker, like more's going to happen. But anyway, so they drive up to the house, and it's kind of just described as, you know, just a nice big house, like a tropical house.
Mm-hmm.
Prendick's like, he goes like round to the library, like there's photos of Moreau like interacting with famous people. He's got a Nobel Prize on the wall. It's got Da Vinci sketches and things like that. And as he's going through the house, he comes into, I can't remember the word for it, arboretum or something like that. It seemed to me like it was just like a conservatory that like we do now, like a greenhouse.
That's what it is in the film.
The house.
So that seems fair.
Yeah.
They built the sets before they changed the script, so I assume that's accurate.
So they were stuck. They had to do some things the same. And in this greenhouse, there's a woman dancing to the romantic song that we hear at the very beginning of the film on the CD player. And she's just dancing, and he watches her because she's beautiful. And she's also described as like slightly feline features. So this
led to my confusion, because obviously he's instantly attracted to her. So I assumed she wasn't an overt cat lady with like, you know, whiskers and proper feline features. I assumed it was just she had a face that one could realistically describe as cat-like. You know. Yeah,
that's why they say things like she has an unusual tan and she has vaguely oriental cheekbones.
Yeah, which made me just think that she was cat-like in that way that people can actually be cat-like. But it's confusing because sometimes the script means that, and sometimes it means, no, this is a weird, like, wolf man. Like, it's very unclear as to when Prendick meets his first proper monster one.
Yes, because it doesn't seem like there's not a moment.
Yeah. At this point in the script, I was like, does he know that this is weird, or does he just think they're people? I don't understand yet. And I felt like
I feel
it needed...
like currently he just thinks that they're foreign.
Yeah, it's like, at the moment, it's just Orientalism. But eventually, it's going to become monsters, and I don't know when that is.
And he talks to Isa?
Mm-hmm.
No, you watched the film, so you should actually know
I watched the documentary. I didn't watch the bloody film.
The name.
They don't really mention it. They don't really talk that much about the script. But I'm assuming it's... let's say Asa.
Yeah, Asa.
Asa.
It's spelt Aissa. So I'll say Asa.
I think if we go with that, then and we're consistent, that's all that matters. And she's rehearsing for Alice in Wonderland, which they're putting on a performance of Alice in Wonderland, and she is Alice in it. And she's kind of referred to as Dr. Moreau's daughter, which again, at this point, I guess you assume is a natural, traditional daughter. Like, he had sex with a woman and made Asa. As far as Prendick is concerned, that's Dr. Moreau's daughter.
And before that, Meling has also referenced him as his father.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, again, they look completely different. So yeah, so he's got a son and a daughter, according to Prendick now so far.
Yes.
Isa sort of like admires his hands and starts calling him a 5-man because he's got 5 fingers.
Yeah.
At which point Meling comes in with his breakfast, as well as Azizolo, which I sort of took as being he's like the head dog man.
He is. Yeah, he
seems. Prendick has no reaction to him at this point, even though he's the head dog man. So
yeah. Okay. So how are we saying his name? We got Meling, we got Asa.
I'm just gonna call him head. I'm just gonna call him head dog man.
Yeah,
because it's a very Azizolo. It's.
We'll go with head dog man.
Head dog man. Because he doesn't really have much character besides being head dog man either. And yeah, so she talks about the fact that they're practicing. Isa gets called away. Prendick starts talking to Montgomery, who appears, starts talking about the Nobel Prize thing, about the fact that he's a real genius.
So Prendick basically, the next major event, we'll cut out some flab, is he goes to sleep in the guest room and he's hearing loads of screaming. And I quite liked this line when it says, Prendick tries to read as the howl comes again, followed by others. Some creatures in agony, perhaps closer to death than before, as they build to such an exquisite expression of suffering that it is as though all the pain in the world had found a single voice. Okay, I like that. It's pretty good.
It does get quite poetic with some of the description lines as well.
Yeah.
And not in a way that's distracting, it's just in a way that
makes it interesting to read, not just visualize. So he goes to sleep and he has a dream about like a weird flayed child. So he wakes up and goes outside. And
he also he dreams about being back in the womb again, because it goes interior, the womb, night. Like you can somehow tell.
Oh god, it does. You're right. Yeah,
the womb.
It does say interior womb.
Yeah.
So he wakes up, and the screams that were initially very animalistic screams have started to resemble the sound of human screams. So he goes to investigate.
He starts going through the house. He's broken out of his room, and he witnesses the head dog man skinning the rabbit from before, which is kind of strange, because as they said, they're all vegetarian, and Prendick keeps going on.
Prendick eventually makes it to the room where the screaming is coming through from. And he walks in. Yeah. And sees this.
He bumps into Isa on the way, and she describes it as like don't go towards the House of Pain. And
which is where the band gets his name from.
It's cultural footnotes throughout this.
Yeah, so they go towards what we'll call the House of Pain from now on. And the House of Pain is basically where Dr. Moreau performs the vivisection stuff. It's where he does his experiments. And Prendick walks in and sees this like hideous birth of like a weird flayed creature and freaks out. So Montgomery like comes towards him and goes like, "No, chill out, you don't know what you're seeing here. This is we can explain," but he obviously is like, "Nope," and runs out. And him and Aisha go for a little escape into the jungle, and they're pursued. So they get in the Montgomery gets into the, what do we call it, the flatbed which has got a tannoy on it, and basically goes like they go on a hunt for them, saying like, help us find the man who came from the sea, which is basically what they kind of call him, because they use vaguely kind of like religious terms or give people titles that sound religious to manipulate the hybrid. So it's like the man who came from the sea and the man who holds the whip and things like that. They kind of try to turn them into mythical things that they need to be afraid of. So they go hunting for Prendick, the man who came from the sea.
But I feel like this is kind of them trying to escalate the more animalistic thing as well.
Yeah.
On the way that they spot a man that's kind of by the river. He's got blood in his mouth from killing a rabbit, and he's like drinking water from the river. And he's described as like having patches of like fur and things like that. So
Yeah.
he's getting more animalistic.
And there's like the sloth people.
And it's like because you've already met. Yeah. But and that guy runs off into the woods, and they come into this. What they kind of describe it as the village, although I don't know why it's separate by any means.
Yeah, it was separate, wasn't it?
And Isa kind of describes it as like the village. The village will help us, and then it doesn't really. It's just sort of like exposition, really.
Well, yeah, they'll help us, but what they've ended up doing as their help, as their escape, is she's taken them to the most fanatical believers of the whole thing.
Yeah,
is that she took them to literally to the church. Basically, she took them to the most obedient to Dr. Moreau of the whole pack.
Exactly. Yeah, they go through this old village. There's just villagers there that look vaguely animalistic, but they're like there's described like dog-like children and things like that. But it's still sort of Prendick's not really getting the gist of what's going on yet. And they go into a hut that's described as having drawings on the walls and things like that, and there's a ceremony that started. They introduce a bunch of small villagers that seem to have a social structure or like standing, which isn't really important at all, and I didn't really get who was in charge of who.
It does a lot of lore and sort of backstory here, because you meet like things that never seem important again, like the silent ones, and they're like the first ones to be made, but they don't have speech, and it's like, that doesn't matter. And then they meet a simian who is like an ape kind of one, and he's the other five finger, which is why they go like, look, we found another five finger, and that kind of makes him more important to them because he's special. And then they basically take him to meet the Sayer of the Law, which is, I guess, the important part of this. The Sayer of the Law is kind of like the priest, I guess. I thought it was. I might be missing something like that's very obvious with that, but I thought it was kind of funny that the Sayer of the Law is sort of goat-like, so it's almost like a satyr. So the satyr is like the Sayer of the Law. I don't know. It was something that I thought, that's kind of clever. Again, that's probably in the original book. But it is. I know the Sayer of the Law is from the book. So Prendick meets the Sayer of the Law. He gets involved in this culture, and basically the Sayer of the Law does, as you say, deliver exposition through one of his sermons, where it's established that there are basically these rules that the hybrids, I don't know what we'll call them, the chimera, that's what they're called, right?
Chimeras, yeah.
Chimeras. They can't break these rules. They have to act human-like. They can't revert back to animalism. So they can't eat flesh. They can't crawl around on all fours. And the Sayer of the Law lets us as the audience know this by delivering his sermon, and all the other ones kind of repeat everything he says. They repeat the laws after him. So they can't make wild fornications or random fornications. They can't follow things, like how a dog or animal would get distracted and just chase after a random thing. They can't do that. They have to act human, and it's like that's how it's reinforced. If they break these laws, then they go to the House of Pain. That's what they're told. It's sort of like
their 10 Commandments, I suppose.
Yeah, their commandments, so they have to...
defined rules like, you must not this, you
must not do this. If you do this, you're taken to the House of Pain, which they all freak out whenever it's mentioned. And they think that Prendick's going to be taken to the House of Pain because he has broken a rule when he tried to escape. At which point, gunfire is heard outside, and Montgomery and all of the humans arrive in the village.
The villagers that Asia swore would help them basically just point to him.
Yeah, straight away. They do.
Yeah, there's nothing like different about it. Montgomery kind of comes towards him. Prendick punches Montgomery. He takes one of the dogmen's guns and runs off into the forest. It's now daytime because he's been running for so far. And there's lots of more like small things, like you said, like the silent ones in this. He's chased by howling gibbon-like men. Something comes out of the trees, and it's a hyena swine hybrid.
Yeah, the hyena swine's important.
I don't know why this is the first impression I got, but it's kind of like when Snow White's like running through the woods and there's the scary trees and it's just scary thing, oh, and then they finally break out into the safety.
Mm-hmm.
And so he finally gets out onto the beach, and apparently everyone's already there because he's just got, I don't know why, but they describe it as being Moreau's there, and Montgomery's there, all the dogmen as well as like Aisha and the villagers are all behind them. At this point, yeah, Prendick comes out and starts like yelling at the villagers, saying like that they're slaves and that there's 100 of you, there's only 2 of them. Why are you like, slaves to them? You don't have to obey them.
These men aren't gods. You have the power to free yourselves.
Yeah. To which point, like Moreau kind of just comes forward and just starts like whispering fiercely, saying like, "Stop this! You're gonna mess this all up, and we're gonna die." It's not so much of a like egotistical, like, this is my work, oh, it's amazing. It's more of the fact that if you don't shut up, we're gonna die.
He gives him...
This is a very unstable system.
He gives him a gun to try and make him feel better. Here, have this gun. Yeah. If that will calm you down, just shut up. Stop trying to incite a rebellion because they'll kill us all.
And Moreau explains kind of 2 things. He basically says like, come back to the house, we'll explain everything. And Prendick goes, yeah, where the radio's still not working. To which Moreau just casually mentions, by the way, nuclear war's broken out between India and Pakistan. So that's why the radio's not working, because they've blocked radios. It's like, oh, okay.
And he also...
nuclear war's broken out, that explains that.
He also explains that, because Prendick's going like, that you've mutilated all these men, and Moreau whispers that they're not men, they're chromatic hybrids. Yes. Experiments in a humanizing process.
I did think that was interesting, that it wasn't humans turned into animals, it was animals turned into humans, which I suspected it. I thought it was humans turned into animals from the start.
Yeah. So they are actually animals that have been experimented on so that they kind of walk upright, wear clothes, try to behave like humans. And that's what all these laws are about, to kind of keep them that way, to make sure their behaviour stays that way. And they're also, I don't know exactly I can't remember when this was explained, but I'm just going to explain it now. He gives them drugs to keep them from reverting. They've got to kind of keep getting things, or else they will turn back into feral animals.
They all go back to the house. Moreau takes Prendick into the House of Pain, the lab, and lifts the vinyl sheet, and apparently they just described it as a mutilated body, which I think doesn't really sell it as the fact that it's a human, but okay. And Moreau basically goes, yeah, is this a human? Like, I thought not. Come with me and I'll tell you more. And he starts projecting old footage onto the wall and explaining, why he kind of does what he does, saying that, like, it's not like I want to... it's not like I'm doing this for my own, like, for fun. It's because I'm doing it because I want to improve the human race. Like, I did things like I've grown wheat that grows in the desert and things like that. And by doing this, I can progress humanity by doing this one awful thing. Like, basically saying, I don't want to kill people, but I have to, because otherwise we won't be able to progress.
He says that he's creating a new race without evil or, like, selfishness or lust or anything like that. And he says that the reason you hear so many screams from the House of Pain is because, like, compressing centuries of evolution into just a brief moment is obviously a very painful process that takes its toll on organisms, and that's why they're in such a horrible situation when they're in that House of Pain. And he says that he also does it seem... It's a bit confusing, because he says that it's painful because it's to accelerate evolution, and that obviously hurts. But he also says that deliberate pain serves only as a training tool, and that will help us fall along from pleasure and stop being lustful. So it's like, wait, is it painful because they're evolving, or because you're using it to, like, instill certain behaviour in them? like a train
Yeah,
pool. Which
and
one
also
is
I
it?
was confused because I just assumed that when they do the kind of law, like you said, that there's no random fornicating or whatever. That's one of the rules. I just assumed that's because he's doing genetic experiments. Like you don't want the dogs mating with the cats, and that just makes sense. But now it seems like he's just genuinely against sex.
I would. I think that'd be fun. I think it'd be
But
good.
you just want craziness.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like Montgomery. I
You
just
just want genetic anarchy.
yeah. So they have this kind of dinner conversation where Moreau basically tries to convince Prendick over the course of a dinner that messing with nature's cool.
Yeah.
He says, "Why do you doubt me? Because you failed to improve humanity with laws." How is that related? Like, there's a jump, isn't it? Jesus.
I like that he is just The thing is that at least he's a UN like lawyer, so they say like earlier on about how he tries to establish law with like an African tribe at some point or something. But if he was just a regular lawyer, like it's not like he's actually the one making the law, like he's
Yeah.
just following it. It's not like he's the head lawyer of the world.
So there's lots of like you're playing God discussion here,
yeah,
and
themes.
Yeah, lots of themes in what's possibly the most painful scene of the actual film, because you're listening to Marlon Brando deliver these monologues, but he's getting it through his PA, so it's taking forever for them to be delivered.
Yeah.
Like this dinner scene in the film is 10 minutes, and this is like what 2 pages for us. But that's just because Marlon Brando's delivering it so slowly.
One thing that is important that they point out in this is that the next subject is a black leopard that they brought on the boat, and the black leopard, it just looks like it's heavily pregnant, and like they've got IVs into its veins and everything like that. And Monroe says about how the next one could be like the perfection; it could be the final one.
Yeah,
like the final.
I don't know what his vision of perfection is. It's a bit like, when like in the Alien Covenant when David's talking about how the xenomorph is perfection, and you're like, why? Why is it? It's horrible. It's a horrible thing. Dr. Moreau has a very similar idea of like beauty and perfection with his experiments. Like this thing is brilliant. No, it's a monstrosity. It's an aberration. But Moreau also shows him that they do this through like lasery technology.
Yeah, nanotechnology, which isn't really explained. It's just the fact that it's science.
It's future. This is the future version of Dr. Moreau. Yeah.
And there's like little tiny things like in the laboratory. There's little mice men, which are just mice that turn into men, and apparently they're fighting each other.
But they're mice-sized, aren't they? I liked that.
We cut to later on. Prendick's gone back to his room where now he has a TV and he can watch CNN, but apparently the radio's still blocked. But he's watching CNN, and apparently the whole thing about India and Pakistan was real, that there is a nuclear fallout. Again, that doesn't factor into anything else. It's just that there is a nuclear fallout. For some reason, that's the excuse for him not having radio contact, which makes no sense. Isaac comes in. Everybody asks him things like, "Are you sad? Oh, do you miss someone?" Basically, just general small talk before the inevitable sex scene, which is a whole page of description.
At least, because we've read a fair few sex scenes now of mixed quality, I think. Like they've gone all over the place. Like the two whenever John Spates wrote them, they were very leering and very creepy. The one in It, though, the sexual abuse thread in It was meant to be creepy, so that was fine. Here I felt like it wasn't as bad as like a John Spates one, where it was, lingering on just how beautiful the woman was. Here it was more like trying to get across how weird, and it was more focusing on the fact that she is an animal person. So it didn't feel quite as creepy reading the description. It felt more like it had a point to go in depth.
Yeah. So they've already been talking about the whole idea of lust previously, as well as the sex scene. Kind of this leads to like more stuff down the road as well. Like it did. I feel like it did go on a tiny bit too long, but as the thing is that it's related to not only the characters, but it's related to the entire point of the film as well. Like the fact that they're kind of giving into more animalistic urges. However, there are it does get a bit like towards the very end, it gets quite stupid. I sent you one line that I thought was quite funny, which is like it basically just sounds like she's experiencing like American werewolf in London. Because as she like as they continue, her nails start to grow and start scratching, becoming like claw marks down the bed.
She lifts. It was confusing. She lifts her arms up into the air, and I was like, "What's she doing?"
Right. Yes.
And then she tears, and then I realised that she's lifting them up so she can thrust them down and claw at the bed. But at first it was just like, what is this? She's just lifting her hands up in a weird pose.
And then it's described as finally ending with a cat-like expression of her orgasm, which I have no idea what that's meant to be like. If I'm meant to know what cats look like when that's happening, how am I meant to be watching this final film and go, now I definitely know she's a cat woman from that shot of her face.
This was my other point. I honestly felt like I'd missed something. But is he supposed to know she's a cat lady yet?
Yeah, it's not really clear. It's just not clear at all. Like, I think he's got a gist, and he definitely gets a gist later on, but I mean, he knows that something's up with her, but he just kind of thinks that she's just foreign.
He just doesn't care, because he's busted, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. There's like the odd moments where they describe her where I think, yeah, you couldn't really get away with that in modern
and someone's
day now.
watching.
But again, it's
someone's watching
writing,
the whole...
So.
It's Montgomery, isn't it?
Yeah, Montgomery is watching, yeah. After that, Isa and Pendrick kind of talk. He asks who her mother was, and she doesn't know. That's the whole point of the conversation. Then it cuts to... And actually, it's there's a line that it's definitely a winking reference to. Like, they say, like, characters from a Conrad novel, Montgomery and Moreau finishing drinks.
No, this is what I was going to bring up. Because I just thought, like, that was something I'd write. Like, it was basically the screenwriter going, I've read Heart of Darkness. And he wants you to know.
That is, if you had written it, it would have said in brackets, I've read Heart of Darkness, by the way.
That was the bit I wanted to highlight. I'd highlighted that line in my script, like characters for a Conrad novel. But they're not even doing anything like characters from a Conrad novel.
No, that's the thing. I don't see why drinking is a
which is why it just
thing.
Felt like he wanted to bring it up. It just felt like characters from a Conrad novel, they were sitting down. I've read Heart of Darkness. It felt very much like he just wanted us to know.
To which basically Montgomery says, by the way, Aisha's sleeping with the guy, and Montgomery goes, yeah, I don't really care. Like, she's my daughter in name, but really I'm just fond of her like a I think he calls her like genetic material, which apparently Isa's now listening in this conversation. So it's swapped from Montgomery watching them to Isa now listening to these guys. And yeah, it's clear that Montgomery has had a thing for Isa, but and then Montgomery says the line of I can't engineer sexual preference. Sorry. and now again apparently it's now time for a second dinner. Oh no, sorry. Now it is dinner because they were talking in the laboratory before. It wasn't a dinner scene. Now it's a dinner scene. The food's brought out. It's all vegetables except for one like dish of rabbit, which is put in front of Montgomery, and Moreau's kind of a bit like taken aback by this, and then Prendick basically drops him in it and says, like, I saw you kill it. Also, you're teaching the head dog guy to kill animals as well. And they and there's a cutaway, and it basically just seems like the head dog guy is just staring at the rabbit like. Moreau doesn't want the animals to get a taste of meat because they don't want to fall on each other and all of that. And so it's clear that that's kind of where they're heading, that the dog's now got a taste of what meat is like, and he likes meat because he's been trained to cut up this rabbit. And in the same scene, Prendick drops in the guy that they spotted down by the stream earlier. He's apparently called Lo Mai now. And basically says, we spotted a guy down by the river. He'd also killed a rabbit. And Asa says who he is, and they promise that Moreau says that he'll deal with him in the morning.
Which is a breaking of the law, so they go to have a trial for him. Kinda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kinda. That evening, Prendick doesn't believe anything about the radio, and so Prendick goes to the radio hut with Meling and Elisa,
whose name we have changed every time we say it.
But you get the gist.
Amy.
And they try the radio, but there's nothing. And apparently it's been like that for 5 days. And then Montgomery is apparently in the shadows like Batman, and says, "Oh,
He is Val Kilmer.
yeah, like, oh, you got us. Looks like we're just jamming the radio." And then and Montgomery insists on trying to offer him a joint again, which he refuses.
Which he
He's like, why don't
doing.
you want my drugs? Exactly. I felt like it was. If it wasn't just the fact, if it was more heavily forced, I would have suspected that there's like something in it that they wanted him to take for some experiment or something. But it's just that he really is proud of his weed, and he just keeps trying to force him onto it.
And this is when I get confused about whether or not Montgomery likes Prendick or not, because on one hand he seems to want him to party with him, but other times he's yelling at him or calling him stupid, and then he's jealous of him for being with the cat lady. So I really don't know how he feels about him.
Yeah, it's kind of unclear, and after that, after Montgomery's basically saying like you're being paranoid, like it's just a radio, like we'd tell you if it was working, and Prendick goes and meets up with the lady of ever changing names, Isa. And they dance in the kind of conservatory patio thing, like it doesn't matter what happens, we'll always have tonight kind of thing, and they dance to that romantic ballad that has appeared twice before.
The next day they go to punish the
Lomai, the guy that did the awful crime of killing a rabbit but also drinking, which is a crime in this society, drinking from the stream. The foghorn goes off like a kind of electronic like speaker system, and it gets all the villagers to come into this compound. And I think there's 67 in total or something like that. Like there are a few missing because some have gone a bit rogue and off in the forest, but there's around just under 70 so. And they bring up the Savior of the Law. Moreau brings up the Savior of the Law. He starts going through the thing that we heard in the village before, like saying, you must not walk on all fours, you must not do this, blah, blah, blah. And when he gets to the law of eating flesh and the villagers are meant to respond, Moreau says stop. And he goes, that one's been broken. Like it was a checklist where it was like, oh, got that one's the one that's happened. The guy kind of tries to run away, but they catch him. They bring him out to the stage, and Moreau just says, "It's all right, I forgive you." And then just
he does that cliche
thing. In the face.
It's that really cliche villain thing of like, "It's okay, I forgive you." Like, you know, sometimes you'd go like, "Shh, shh, shh," and hold them close, like, "I forgive you," shh, and then shoot them. It's that one. But I did like
more in this one because it's meant to be that whole religious imagery, and I really found it quite. I laughed a bit when it got to the next line.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Montgomery's response to it is funny. Is that the line you're talking about? Yeah.
Well, that and the Savior of the Law's line, which is "the gun has spoken."
Yeah, it is good.
I just found it quite funny.
But Montgomery says, like after he blows his head off, Montgomery says, yeah, he's with the program now. He's a believer after the execution. But yeah, I do like that stuff. That's probably my favorite part. Is the law and the religion and that element of it. That stuff is quite funny in a blackly comedic way. The gun is good and it is spoken and all that stuff. I do like that stuff. That's probably my favorite element of the script.
Yeah,
probably
definitely.
Makes the Sayer of the Law, in a way, my favourite character. Even if all he really does is repeat these laws, they're the most interesting part of it.
I was just about to say, I realised who my favourite character is, because it's Azazelo, the head dog guy, whatever his name. He's also the one
because he says hallelujah.
He says hallelujah, but I think he's also the one that, I forgot to mention this, but when they're unloading stuff off the ship at the very beginning, he just turns to the Prendick and goes, yabba dabba doo. Like he says Fred Flintstone's line. Which I was like, what? Are you actually trying to reference Fred Flintstone in this horror film? And I really liked that.
You're right, yeah, you're right, you did.
Any character that references Fred Flintstone is a fan favourite for me. Prendick doesn't really like this. That's kind of like the meeting for the day done. They all break up, they go to their jobs. Prendick goes to a marijuana field, like the Montgomery's prize marijuana field, and he's walking through, and Montgomery has some of the dogmen with him, including Azazelo, Yabba Dabba Doo, head dog.
Azazelo, Isha, Aisha, Isaac.
It's like with the Game of Thrones characters, he's getting more and more titles as the show goes on.
Azazalo, the head dog
Yeah.
man. Yabba dabba doo. Sayer of Hallelujah.
um, and Montgomery's basically hinting that he's almost having like a coup where he's teaching them to eat meat, and that's like fine.
Is he
Which
having
sort
a
of
coup
feels like
though?
it's gonna.
What is his point?
It's not really. Well, it's not like he's trying to overthrow Moreau. He just thinks that they should have meat, and so he's just feeding them meat.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's a thing that's going to be coming back later on.
Because this
which
is
Semi does.
well, this is my
not.
point. When I earlier mentioned when we talked about the bit with the rabbit, and I said he does it for no reason. I understand that he's trying to teach them that it's okay. My point is more, why is he doing that? Because it's not like he respects them. He whips them and abuses them. So why does he care so much if they eat meat? Why does he care?
I think it's just because it feels like it's just because it's what he wants. Like he thinks that animals should be allowed to eat meat, so that's fine. And I think he resents like the fact that he can't eat meat sometimes. Like, it just feels like it's just a personal little vendetta rather than, like I said, I say coup. Like, the thing is, it's not like he's structuring it. It's not like he's keeping it massively secret. He's just doing it because he feels like it. Like, that's kind of the free spirit part of him. And also, I suppose it's just a thing of how, by not sticking to the law, he's inevitably going to help in the collapse of everything. But yeah, it's not the most important plot point. It's just that they take time explaining it. Aisha has, like, a mini scene where it's revealed that she's turning more into a cat. Like she has to like pluck whiskers off of her face now.
Is this the bit where she has?
No,
not yet. Okay. Okay.
We're getting to that. Now it's nighttime, and it's the performance of Alice is underway on the stage.
Oh, that's now, is it? Because this is when it gets this bit I liked when they start showing. Like afterwards, they put on.
Yeah, so they do.
And that's when he goes Yabba Dabba Doo again.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I was thought I'd get this in before it comes up again, because they do. So they do the performance of Alice. I thought there was a quite funny line actually where they do the performance, and it's kind of it's the section of the famous section of I don't want to go among mad people. Like, oh, get it? Because it's crazy here. Woo, symbolism, connections, and then I did find this one bit funny where Aisha kind of comes off the stage. And Prendick goes, "Terrific! You were the best Alice I've ever seen." And Aisha just says, "How many Alices have you seen?" And he doesn't respond. Like it was a small moment where it didn't feel necessary. I just liked that he's basically just a bit of a dick. Like he doesn't actually like have an answer for that. He could have easily just lied and said, "Oh, I've seen many," but he just doesn't because he can't be bothered.
And then after the show as a celebration, they put on like a show reel of like. Different things that might appease animals.
So they set up like the projector, and as Azazalo, head dog of many names, it says he punches the keyboard and shouts "Yabba Dabba Doo" as a animated Fred Flintstone appears on the screen.
Yeah, and then he puts on like Godzilla as well, I think.
Yeah, there's like clips from King Kong and Godzilla and something about a song called Hot Voodoo. The Beast People are like watching because it's like their introduction to Western media.
I was wondering why Dr. Moreau would allow them to watch like King Kong and things like that. Because it feels like he's placating them by showing them animal stuff, whereas he wants them to be acting like humans. Shouldn't he be showing them like My Fair Lady or something?
I was just about to suggest something like that. Yeah, it does seem a bit strange. Yeah, and also it is all animalistic. Yeah, showing Godzilla and King Kong
destroying humans, like inciting rebellion.
Exactly. I'm not really sure what the point of that.
You should have put on
choosing that footage is, but
you should have put on Remains of the Day. All of this is intercut with the latest experiment.
Yeah,
Dr.
so it's
Moreau
kind
is
of like
birthing the.
It's sort of like I suppose it's the Christopher Nolan action scene. As there's three things going on at once. There's the projection. There's Prendick and Isa trying their second attempt to get to the boat. The first being when they ended up going to the village, and at the same time they're now completing the final experiment in the House of Pain. Moreau is the black jaguar is giving birth, quotation marks, giving birth, and it kind of it cuts between these scenes for a moment.
I bet that would have been dramatic to watch. I bet that would have been cool.
I like the way that they described the whole the birth of this new chimera. Like that's what they called the monster, the chimera, and it is really it sounds quite gruesome, the way that they've described it.
Do you want to know something about it?
What?
This entire plot point isn't in the film.
What?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that this is the part where the film got interesting.
Yes,
like
that is exactly what I thought. This was like probably my favourite sequence was this intercutting bit with the...
yes,
with the,
definitely.
And it's not in the film. None of the gory body horror stuff that's here is in the film. And the inciting incident that starts the rebellion is completely different because they PG-13 it. And probably because Marlon Brando couldn't be bothered to learn any of his lines and just wanted to sit down.
And I like some of these descriptions of the chimera being born, so I'll just read out like 2 sentences or a section where he turns his attention to the large throbbing life form that is still coiled within its mother's dying shell. Moreau reaches down and cuts into the membrane. A terrible, wet, tearing sound, and something comes upwards from the incision, lunging towards Moreau. An exploded, malformed, squealing thing, bifurcated, far bigger than it should be. The skinless snout opening wide to reveal a double row of jagged teeth. So it's kind of like yeah, that was what I was gonna go into. It's a creepy creature, and it's cool, and I liked that where it basically got into the body horror aspect, like you said.
Yeah.
As well as the creature feature side of it. It just made it a lot more fun.
This felt like when it became the sort of Richard Stanley version, and this feels like it's probably the point where the film and the script completely cease to resemble each other. Because this is when it gets a bit, I don't want to say schlocky, but this is when it becomes more sci-fi horror. And that's a good thing, because you see all those concept art in the documentary, and it feels like all the cool stuff is from this part of the film.
Yes, yeah. Because the lore is interesting, but I think it's interesting in that it serves a greater background for this more interesting story, like a more fun, enjoyable story. But so these 3 things are going on at once. Pendrick kind of is trying to get all the stuff ready for the boat, and then he hears screaming coming from the House of Pain. And they turn around, and one of the dogmen is running at them. And the dogman screams before dropping down dead. Pendrick kind of pushes Asa away to run away, and this giant
flayed cat is what they call it. Something like that.
Comes like running at him like talons and rips into Prendick before a gunshot goes off, scaring it, and it runs off into the woods. But Prendick has been kind of ripped up quite badly, but not fatally. Montgomery comes and starts helping him. Moreau then runs up on his horse and says, "Oh, we're going to go catch him." Montgomery says, "Oh, I'll come with you." To which Moreau says something to the gist of like, "I don't need you. I'm going on my own," and leaves Montgomery there. And Montgomery and Isa take again different name takes Prendick into the guest room to kind of recover him, while Moreau goes off and tries to catch the chimera.
Yes. So Moreau is going through the jungle looking for the beast, and eventually there is an encounter. I did like the descriptions here as well. When he shoots at it and takes like a chunk out of it, and then it pounces on him, wounds him. This is
the bit where it reminded me a lot more of like a Jurassic Park, Jurassic World kind of thing.
And it pounces on him, and because of like the proximity that it is to him, he has like a gun already in its throat and blasts the top of its head off. And I was like, oh, cool. But he's wounded and lying there after the fight. So he kills the chimera, but it's taken a chunk out of him. And at this point, the hyena, what do we call it? The hyena swine.
Hyena swine, yeah.
Kind of comes across him. And the hyena swine is at this point kind of leading his own bunch of rebels. And so he sees Moreau lying there, and Moreau's like, "Help me, children, help me!" And the hyena's like,
"I love you. You're my creation. You've never hurt me." The
hyena got pissed off when he saw Moreau shoot the
other guy.
The other guy, yeah.
Lomi or whatever. Yeah.
After that execution, it describes how the hyena men were kind of like growling, and they earlier they tried to approach Montgomery and start a thing with him, and there was a bit of tension. So they're seeing their master lying there and like, oh, he bleeds. He is not a god. He can die. Yeah. And so they take a machete and they hack him to death,
which is cool. And it wasn't something that I was expecting. Not
there's a good death scene.
Not this early in the script. It's kind of like it's not near enough to say it's at the end of the script yet. So I wasn't expecting the titular character to be killed off.
Yeah.
This early on.
He dies earlier and stupider in the film. In the film, in the film, it is basically just a direct correlation between he stages that execution and that prompts the hyena people to just go into Moreau's house and kill him. You know, there's none of the... They don't go out on a hunt. They don't get to sort of see him in a weakened state and then believe that they can kill him. They just sort of go...
Yeah, which makes more sense.
Yeah, because it's like, surely this has happened before. Why would now be the breaking point? He's been enforcing these laws forever, but in the film, they just like decide now we're going to go march into the house and just kill him. And they tear him apart, but they do it in a PG-13 way, which is just awful. I looked this bit up because I just wanted to know how he died in the film. So this is a much better death, and results from a more fun subplot with the creature feature part that isn't in the film.
Yeah. So it's got a more interesting subplot, as well as the fact that, like I said, it features into the themes of he's a god. Oh, he's not a god really. Oh, we'll kill him. That just makes logical sense for all the creatures. The next scene, Prendick waking up in the guest room, and Aisha's... I find a new way to say her name every single time.
Ashley.
And and Asa is there.
Asa? That's Asa Butterfield now.
Maybe Asa is the right way to say it, because it's Aissa. It's Isa. I'm sticking to Isa.
ISIS.
Isa is there, and of course, since they've just woken up and they're on the bed, it's a sex scene.
They have to back.
And she's now way more animalistic. Like she's got fur on her face, but is nonetheless beautiful.
She pushes his head over to her bosoms.
Yeah.
And then pushes him down further, and she has another set.
Yeah, she's. That's the big reveal, and it's I'm trying to find the exact wording of it, because it was kind of like okay, right, we're going to this. She guides his face further down her body to another set of breasts, vestigial buds that have erupted on the smooth skin of her torso. Yeah, kissing wildly at her feral mammaries.
I just remembered something. This reminded me, just because it was, the reveal that she has an extra animal part, reminded me of something that from the documentary. Marlon Brando wanted his character to constantly be wearing a hat and a bucket, because he wanted a reveal to be that he had a dolphin fin on his head.
Why a dolphin fin?
I don't know.
But they don't reveal it.
No, it doesn't happen.
Good. But the thing is that in the plot, it's animals turned into humans.
Yeah, so why would he have stuck?
Exactly. So is he meant to have been a dolphin that came alive and became a human?
He's a hyper-evolved dolphin.
Also, does that mean that, so basically at this point she's turning more cat? At some point, is she just going to turn back into a cat?
Do cats have multiple breasts?
Yeah, well, female ones do.
Do they?
Because it's like for...
I don't know, I don't spend long staring at cats' breasts, Jack.
I was going to say it's like a cow, like with others. Like, it's just for feeding multiple kittens at once.
That makes this way more disgusting when you call them udders.
That's what they are! It's the same purpose. But yeah, so she's slowly turning back into a kitten.
Yeah, and I assume, that she'll turn into... It must be proportional. She can't shrink, so she must be a giant cat.
That was the main thing that's confusing me. Just by giving them these genetics, like, is she meant to be a tiger or something?
Yeah.
Or is it meant to be, I suppose, a tiger then?
Yeah.
But okay.
Because the mouse people are still mouse-sized, aren't they?
You're right. Yeah. Okay, we've just logicked it ourselves. So
so she can't shrink into a cat.
No. Because I did have this really fun idea of, like, while I was at this point, is if they escape, is he just going to have her in, like, a cat carrier and go, this is my wife? And this is the point where there starts getting some pathetic fallacy, as there's, like, thunder and lightning and storms, as the island falls into chaos.
Oh god, it calls them vestigial buds.
Yeah, I described that. Buds.
Buds? Jesus.
So Moreau's been killed. So they're back at the house. Montgomery's kind of waiting for the search party to come back, and the animals come back. The swine men come back with kind of like a crucified Moreau. Again, more god imagery here, and Montgomery's says something to the like the idea of, oh, it's all over, we're doomed.
Yeah. And Prendick comes in and goes, no, I've got an idea, and basically invents a new stage to the religion. He writes the New Testament. He says, no, he's still around. He's all around us, and he's watching you.
That was just his mortal vessel.
Because they're like, now that the Chimera are like, now that he's dead, is there no law? Because he was the lawmaker, so is there no law? Yeah. And he's like, no, he's around, watching you still. He's watching you, and he's speaking to me, saying you gotta behave. And Montgomery's like, that's brilliant. Which makes me think
that's what I quite liked about it, is that Montgomery's basically like, you genius, you fooled these feral animals into believing there's a god.
Which makes me think again that Montgomery likes Prendick, but then he'll do something later that made me go, oh no, do you?
Yeah, it's kind of, again, I think free spirit is well, the thing is that I feel like I'm just excusing him having an inconsistent character by calling him a free spirit.
Wild card.
He is just, wild card, wild card, bitches, It's the next day, and they've basically set up Moreau's body on like a pyre to like burn his mortal body and release the spirit. And then while that's being built, Montgomery and
because they have a meet up the next day where they have a conversation, and Montgomery's like, this will only work for so long because without the drugs they're going to revert, and no law or reinforcement will keep them in check then. Like, it's a biological thing, they will become animals again. And then he offers him his weed again, and he doesn't take it, and then he just sort of like storms out. He gets really mad.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And he starts saying things like, I don't know what this means, but we're nothing. We're just nothing. We're bubbles blown by a baby.
Yeah.
What does that mean? So Montgomery basically gives up, even though they just came for a solution and he was thrilled about it. He's now instantly back to despair and just goes like, we should just get high.
He basically just turns into like Hunter S. Thompson in like one scene. Because he does start talking about, like, he literally goes off into a list of speed, methadone, morphine, mescaline, reds, blues, ludes, acids, lysergic, and my own special brew, the Montgomery cocktail, which is basically like the scene at the beginning of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas where he pops open the trunk and says, like, uppers, downers, a galaxy of drugs and things like that. It does really, like, read like that. And then he literally just goes outside to where...
But he gets mad. Why does he get mad at Prendick? Why is he?
Because he won't accept the drugs. He doesn't want to party with him, and he just goes outside to where the villagers are like standing around this funeral pyre. Apparently, his pockets are just filled with pills. And he just starts open.
I can't imagine. This doesn't happen in the film either, which is one of the more fun parts. It's just
ridiculous, the idea of how many pills this guy just has in his pockets.
This is where the film
handfuls.
This is where the film the script starts to resemble the making of, like.
Yes, that, as we were talking about before, yeah.
Because he basically gets all the animals, the Chimera high, gets them to drive around the vehicle, just joyriding, and starts playing Jimi Hendrix music, and just like. It just becomes the Wolf of Wall Street.
At this point, Prendick goes out. Prendick goes out. So many names are hard to pronounce in this film. Prendick goes out to Isa.
Prendick goes with Isa, Dogman,
Azuzulu, Zazu. He goes. So he goes to the pyre next to the guy that's just handing out pocket loads of drugs, and they go, "Do you want to go now?" And he goes, "Yes, we should probably go now." But then Prendick says, actually first I've got to do something, as they have with every kind of dramatic ending. They've got to go, I've got a job to do first. There's something I have to do.
He wants to go get the drugs so that he can continue to supply them to Ice Man.
Yeah, so you can continue having a cat mistress, a feline mistress.
Yeah, because I don't think he's going to want to bang her when she's an actual tiger.
No, no. So he goes into, but he does also have he's also kind of like a humanitarian thing as well, because he goes into the House of Pain and they say empty the cages. They start emptying all of them.
And Moreau's voice is speaking over the...
Yeah, it's from that projector that they showed where he was showing him exposition before, and and he stops it, and he just noted that the exposition is there. He takes Moreau's black book. He sees that all the chemical equations are there, so he could make the drugs to, make Isa not a cat lady. In the
keep
meantime,
ISIS.
everything else, to keep ISIS at bay. At which point, Montgomery has now gone down to the beach playing Jimi Hendrix, like he said. He's gone down to the boat and he's just set fire to the boat because why not? He's gone crazy and he's trying to have a party. He starts getting undressed, saying like, "All flesh is grass, boys and girls. You blink and it's all gone."
And then he starts grinding against one of them.
He grabs an already disheveled beast woman and breaks into a demented frenzy in very dirty boogie. I know it sounds even funnier because I've got the English accent, so it sounds way like dirty boogie. It sounds too stupid in my voice. So basically, the boat's gone. So we already know, the audience already know that there's actually no way to escape now for Prendick, but they don't know that.
The thing is, we can't say Prendick, but there's definitely a scene in the script where they actually talk about how to pronounce it. Because when he meets Isis, she goes
it's Prendick. Prendick, I pronounced right.
Prendick.
It's pronounced right, but it's such an unusual name that I'm just so not used to it.
He doesn't have that name in the film. I can't remember what his name is, but they changed it.
Probably because it's got the word dick in it. Like that's too risque for that film. In the meantime, the dogmen have now broken into the house and they've got the guns. They've got the fire that kills.
The hyena. The hyena rebels we're talking about here.
Yeah. And they've got and Azezelo, the head dog Yabba Dabba Doo, has got a grenade. They start walking the halls of the house and they bump into Isa and they start threatening her because they're kind of jealous about how well she was treated.
Because she was never whipped or anything. She was his daughter.
One of the dogmen starts attacking her. She her claws grow out again, and she basically rakes across his face, blinding the guy. Two more attack her, and it just turns into a fight scene where she's trying to fight against them. And she springs at Azezelo, the head dog guy, and she's shot and killed. And so these hyenas, they come out now with all these guns, and they're in the courtyard, like the main area where the pyre is now burning, the dead Dr. Moreau, and all the kind of the villagers are there saying something along the lines of, "Is the law still around? I don't know." And the hyena's going, "Yes, I'm God. You should follow me now." And
apes follow Koba now.
Yeah. And Sayer of the Law has his line of, "Are we not men?" It's really this is a real theological breakdown for him. I don't know.
He's like, "No, we should be civilized," and then he gets shot. At this point, people just get shot. Moreau got quite a big death. Everyone else just gets shot. The Sayer of the Law gets shot in a group with a load of other characters.
Yeah. I thought that I think it did well to sell the craziness of it though, and it made I liked that they were kind of speeding up the kills now, because that was one page, Ice is gone, the next the Sayer of the Lord's gone, so they're kind of they're speeding up the action of everything. And now it's back to the beach party. Ben Montgomery's suddenly realizing that all these creatures might not like him as much as he thinks, because he's just standing naked next to this giant burning house. He can hear gunfire. The animals start turning on him, saying "No more masters," and the little pink sloth thing, which we haven't really addressed. I felt like that would have been your favourite character. Just the idea of this little fleshy sloth running around, steps forward and shoots Montgomery, who kind of staggers back. Which again, I think that this would be one of your favourite lines, where he just said, "Shit, you're always such a sweet little fucker too. Thanks a lot." and then dies, and the animals rip him apart. In the meantime, Pendrick, he's still in the lab trying to figure out his way out. Two kind of hyenas.
The hyena swine and the boar man.
They start attacking him.
Shooting the place up, destroying stuff. But they get distracted by the voice of Moreau on the projector and think, like, he's back!
Yeah, and then they get confused because they're not used to the recording, which gives Prendick enough time to kind of escape.
Using the laser.
Using the nanotechnology laser, which makes no sense whatsoever, but whatever. None of this does, so I can forgive that. Kills one of them. Prendick starts running away, but the hyena swine pulls the pin in a grenade, goes to throw it before one of the creatures kind of latches out from one of these tanks that have been burst in all the gunfire.
Tentacle in it.
Yeah, a tentacle kind of grabs hold of his hand just as he's about to throw the grenade, and the hyena starts like shrieking because he's going to die now, and then the whole lab explodes. Prendick now got into the house. He's calling for Isa, and he's just seeing like dead bodies everywhere. He goes through the hallway, and there's all the dead dogs from Isa killing them, and turns around, and at the dining table, Isa's dead body is just on the dining table with a dogmen and a Zezalo head dog. Yabba Dabba Doo is about to eat. Apparently, they're about to eat her corpse. To which Prendick now is filled with primal rage, and he turns into Rambo for a second and guns down the dogmen.
And kills Yabba Dabba Doo. No, he leaves Yabba Doo. He doesn't kill Yabba Doo.
Yeah, so he shoots like in a spray of bullets from this automatic weapon, kills all of them except for Yabba Dabba Doo, who runs out the window and flees yelping into the night.
Yeah.
And he gets a moment with the dead body of Isa.
Did you think that because the hyena man in a way is the sort of the main villain?
Sort of, yeah.
But
it's
he
not
isn't
very described. I didn't know if it was multiple hyena men or just one.
Yeah,
because it's such a generic name.
And he doesn't get like he doesn't get a name. He's just called hyena swine. Whereas all the other important ones get a name, like Azazelou and Mailing and whatnot. And then he's just killed quite abruptly. It felt it felt like he was more important than the script was giving him credit for.
I felt like they just kind of wanted to leave it like he was open, in that they didn't want to make an obvious like villain right from the start. And because of that, it meant that he wasn't an obvious villain even at the end. Like he was just kind of doing evil things, and they didn't. He didn't need a character, it's just that he needed to be recognisable. And like I said, I didn't even know if there were multiple hyena swine, because it's not like he made just one. And now Prendick escapes the house, because the next shot is apparently the whole house exploding, even though the last shot was Prendick in standing over the dead body of Isa. Then we cut to Prendick on the beach at dawn. The boat's kind of just been burnt out. Montgomery's body is at his feet. And Maling's basically just saying, everyone's gone crazy, just killing everyone, and Prendick just patronisingly pats him on the head.
And writes the New Testament.
He kind of just changes his mind to not try and leave, goes back to the compound, sends off the kind of air raid signal that signifies to send everyone to the grounds, and he stands in front of everyone and says he's not dead, he's still speaking to me right now as a spirit, and the House of Pain will return.
Yeah, it was quite dark for Prendick. This human rights lawyer is like, I will return the House of Pain if you don't do what I...
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I do find it quite funny that so everyone showed up, including Azazelou, head dog, Yabba Dabba Doo guy, and Azazelou is kind of just in the crowd, to which he calls him forward, and apparently he's kneeling. He takes his hand and starts licking his hand like a dog. To which point Prendick just puts the gun against his forehead and shoots him point blank in front of everyone. And he's already broken bad. And then someone else says the gun has spoken. Which I just thought was it was quite funny. And now, so the finale's kind of over mainly. Prendick has taken control of everything. I think it says that he stays with them for 6 months.
Yeah.
They show a montage now of him
and they're all
living in a cave, rewriting the laws and trying to keep the structure.
It made me feel like there was less jeopardy when it revealed that they could go 6 months without turning feral.
9 months, actually. So, yeah, it's kind of, and they still haven't completely changed.
He could have got a lot of. He could have got a lot of bang time out of his cat mistress.
That's the thing, is that they don't even describe how the other people are changing physically either. So it seems very strange. They just change like how they're saying that most of them can't even talk now. So it's very slow for them.
Yeah, and then most of them are killed in a monsoon because of diseases.
Which then Frenric just goes like, I still would have died from the disease anyway. Like he somehow knows that she had a weak immune system or something like that from the 2 times he had sex with her. Gradually, so he basically rules over them as the animals become more and more feral, and he gets their help to build like a jetty.
And then sails away saying, I'll bring back help. And they're left reading Alice in Wonderland until they can't think anymore. We return now to the framing device.
No.
As Prendick is in it.
There's a little moment before that.
Oh, nah.
So Prendick is out at sea.
Oh, nah.
For, it says, like 2 days.
Is this the moment I just mentioned about him reading the book and not being able to read it anymore?
Where he gets rescued by sailors, and like he looks up and they look like animals to him. So clearly he's kind of gone a bit crazy. It's kind of similar to how in Gulliver's Travels, like how the last island that he goes to is the Yahoos, where like the horses are intelligent creatures and the humans are like really ugly, like unintelligent creatures. And so when Gulliver goes back home, like he keeps seeing humans as disgusting and he wants to spend time with his horses instead. Like that's the whole... It's basically like the ending of Gulliver's Travels with that, where now he's come home and he sees animals as humans all the time. Like he's basically just broken.
Well, that was because they're treating him as he's like gone to a mental place where they do the mentals, and the doctors there are like carrying birds, and that was one of the images in the concept art that they showed where I was like, where is that? Because it's like these suited vultures with glasses on, and that comes up in the script, and then he goes out into the streets and he sees like, you know, metropolitan city with like dog people wandering around, porcupine cops and everything, which again was in the script, and I was like, where is this gonna fit in? But now not in the script, in the concept art, I was like, where is that gonna be? Now I know it's from this ending that it of course isn't in the film.
And then obviously like he just can't be around people anymore, so he goes to he, as you said, we go back to the framing device where he's now back in New England.
Yes.
Where he's now back in New England, and he's just about to commit suicide in this little hut when the dog comes up to the hut and keeps barking, and because the dog won't shut up, he like opens the door and he goes, he
finds purpose in life again because the dog won't shut up.
I don't know. Maybe he's gonna end up with the dog. I don't
know.
No!
Do you think he's gonna bang the dog?
No.
Gonna lick its buds?
No. So he goes outside. He goes out the hut with the dog, and he looks at the
pointy buds.
He looks at the sunset, and he just stares into the sweet liquid eyes of the dog.
Yeah, see, he's gonna bang that dog.
He's tried cats. He's now working his way up to dogs. But yeah, that's the Island of Dr Moreau.
It is.
Yeah, it was good. I thought it was enjoyable. It felt like it would have been a fun film, like a B movie. I still think it should be under the realms of B movie.
It would have been way better than the film that emerged, particularly its last third. Like when I was reading it, I messaged you and said like it's okay, but then when it got towards the end, I did think it got quite a bit better.
I still think overall, I think it's just okay.
It has some nice descriptions, some reasonably well written poetic bits, and some better dialogue. And I did like the descent into madness stuff at the end. It was just some of the, I think particularly a lot of the Moreau scenes just dragged. I felt like Moreau was the worst character.
There's nothing too interesting to him.
It just sort of rambles about God and creation, and
I feel like they try to build up this sort of enigmatic figure that they sort of do in, Heart of Darkness. I don't want to step on your toes.
I have read it,
but
so I can talk about it if we need to.
They talk about Marlowe, Kurtz, right? I have read it. You haven't
read it, so don't try and.
I don't reread it
Clearly
every
not
week like you do. But they sort of like keep talking about him like as it builds up to it, and whereas with Moreau,
He's not in it much. Yeah, he's an enigmatic figure that you learn about through other people and kind of gather an impression, a mythic impression of him, and that is kind of what they start doing. But then you spend a lot of time with him rambling, and he's a really boring old man.
I think this is definitely a film that sells itself on the visuals.
Mm-hmm.
In the hands of a really good director, this could be a really good film. In the hands of an incompetent director, it could be a dull film. Yeah, exactly.
Which it was.
Well, that's what is. The thing is that wasn't even the same script by the end, so that's completely different.
And no warlock could save it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting. I mean, I think if I had to recommend something to do with this, it sounds like I would be recommending the documentary, which just sounds a lot more fun, and also
the documentary was the most enjoyable part of any of this for me.
I think if you're interested in just reading the script for this, I think it's good for some of its descriptions. I like the odd line. I would prefer seeing a film of the making of this film than this script verbatim.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I agree. But I think the change of setting and the updating it to be like H.G. Wells's, what H.G. Wells would do now was cool. And some of the horror elements were cool. It was just a kind of slow, dull opening. Yeah. Put me off it a bit, maybe. Yeah. So what are we doing next time?
Next time, I suppose it should be, unless something else comes up, I suppose it's Alien 3.
We just did Alien. What about Joss Whedon's sexist Wonder Woman?
Ooh, yeah, actually, shall we try that? Yeah, so next time it will be Sexist Wonder Woman, which is not the full title, it's just Wonder Woman. It's just what it's become sort of known as. We haven't read it, so maybe we'll agree.
I've read bits of it.
Maybe we'll disagree. Oh, alright, you don't have to jump ahead. Right, thank you very much for listening. If you want to catch the rest of this podcast, it's under Backstory Scripts on iTunes, Stitcher, every single podcast app. We also have the separate one, Real Opinions. This used to be on that feed, but now it's a completely separate thing. That's under the Real Opinions podcast, and you can catch every single episode of both of those shows on our YouTube channel, Real Opinions,
which also has standard videos.
Yeah, well. It has shorter 10-minute reviews of modern films and stuff like that.
And the good old classic videos, Real Opinions classic.
Oh, yeah. The occasional ones that come out where they're an hour long and it's just us arguing about about getting stupidly into depth about the farting sounds in Swiss Army Man or things like that.
If you want more descriptions of buds, of cat buds, corpse farts.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, thank you very much for listening. Bye.
Bye.